Please welcome veteran DynamicsCon speakers Liz Pham and Simon Owen. Today, they will be presenting their premiering content, The Magic of Value, revealing the secrets. Please stick around after Liz and Simon's session for a live Q&A.
Hello everyone, and welcome to DynamicsCon Virtual 2024. And here we are in the cross-product stream. And in just a minute, we're going to kick off. And as you can tell, we're suitably dressed to do some magic for you. And today is going to be the magic of value that we're talking about. So have you ever wondered how some projects, it just seems like everything happens seamlessly behind the scenes? Perhaps everything is calm, but maybe it isn't. When it comes to go live, when it comes to the big show, everything goes smoothly. Everyone's happy, big smiling faces. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're a developer, you're a business leader, you're a business analyst, maybe you're a project manager or a scrum master. We're going to break this down and demystify some of this magic for you and just give you a framework that you too can go through and deliver magic and celebrate success throughout all of your projects and objectives. Let's introduce ourselves. Do you want to go first, Liz?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me back again for a third year in a row. Liz Pham. I'm a product manager and also a Power Platform solution architect. So excited to be here on this magical day with everyone.
Yeah, and hi, folks. So Simon Owen. I'm a Power Platform SME, mostly looking at governance and guardrails and adoption and enablement. So I work my magic across the whole platform and more into the Copilot space these days as well. So we're going to be your magicians for today. We're going to be your hosts. But it's not just us who is going to do some magic for you. We're going to kick off by showing you a magic trick. And this is courtesy of Vinh Giang. So he's a Vietnamese Australian who is a public speaker. Originally, he was a magician, but also he talks a lot on communication and getting his message across. And he does a lot of training courses. And this is one of the ways that he brings that to life. So we're just going to show you the trick, and then we're going to break this approach down and tell you a little bit more. So just watch this for a minute or so, and I think you're going to enjoy it.
Well, of course. But I'd love to show you a video. So when I show you this video, it's a trick. It's a problem. See if you can solve it. So if we could just go to the video, please.
Come on, YouTube, play nice.
See if you can solve this problem. Here we go. What you're about to witness is one of the oldest psychological illusions in the world. And before we go any further, I want you to make sure that every single card here is in actual fact different. That is the first thing I want you to notice. The second thing is I want you to see that the backs are all actually blue. Now, the interesting thing about the color blue is the psychological implications it actually has on the human mind. Now, if you're actually here, I'll get you to cut the cards and you can pick any card you like at random. Because you're not, let's just go with a random card here. Let's say that's your chosen card, okay? Remember that card. It's very important you actually do remember that card. Because if you don't, this next bit actually won't make sense. So, look, I understand that this card here isn't your card. Okay? I understand that the 10 isn't. But I want you to pretend that you can visualize your card in that 10 there. So watch. If you have a look at this card here, the funny thing is, it becomes your card. Now, did you see the change? Did you see it? Not the change there, that's not the change I'm talking about. Did you see this change here? You see, because if you didn't see this change, then chances are you didn't see this change. Every single card becomes red. Every single one. And this right here is one of the oldest psychological illusions in the world. Now here's...
So I think you'll agree with me that was astonishing. I have no idea how he did it, and I hope that you don't too. But what we're going to do, we're going to talk about how this can be broken down and give you a framework that you can use to create your own magic and show your audience the value that they deserve. So let's just get into that a little bit. Liz, you can kick us off.
Yeah. Well, one of the mottos I'll share with everyone today is the motto of the Magic Circle. It's Indocilis Private Locae, which means to not disclose the secrets, but you're in luck because today we're going to let you in on the secrets on how Vinh had framed up his magic trick and really what he was trying to show us, but then really thinking about how can we take what he had done with the different solutions that we build in terms of articulating what it is that we're going to do, the value it's going to bring, but then also incorporating that element of magic into it so you can really get people engaged. So let's pretend we're Vin here. When you're watching the video, I don't know if anyone noticed, when he started, he had a suit on. By the end of it, he was wearing a t-shirt. We saw a little sleight of hands where the cards changed colors. But do you think that was all by mistake? Do you think he had this maybe planned or intended? So when you think about, how you start to frame up your magic trick, we like to think about what the outcome first is. So this is really thinking about what is the problem? What is it that we want to tell people, but then what are we going to do to solve it? So you want to think about the impact of that problem, who might be impacted by that, but then also start to think about ways that you might solve for it. So in Vin's case, he started to think about, I want to show people, the psychological aspect of illusions and how it can trick our minds. And then he came up with a magic trick to really articulate that problem. Next step would be our scenario setup. So this is where you think about who your stakeholders are. In Vin's case, he had to think about who his audience member were and how he could connect with them. And so he also had to consider, what is that message that he's communicating, but then also how does he start to generate that excitement and really that engagement. Next, we move on to conditions for success. So this is really thinking about the components that went into the making of the magic trick. So you're thinking about, who do you need to engage to build? How do you actually implement and bring that solution to life? But then also what processes do you need to engage in? So think about this as all the things that happen behind the curtain. And then the last step here in our framework is how do we execute with flair? So you got people excited in the beginning, but once you get ready to actually perform your magic trick, how do you reinvigorate that excitement? How do you create that anticipation? How do you also gauge that you're getting a good response and that it's successful? How do you celebrate that and really be a part of something special? So we're going to take this framework and apply it to how we can describe the value of the cool things, the cool solutions that we're building, and really help everyone here understand how you can tell your story, but then also bring some magic into the things that you're going to share with the world.
Cool. So it looks like a really repeatable framework, Liz. That's what we're saying, isn't it?
Absolutely. And many of you might be wondering, why is this important? Like, why is it important to describe the value of the amazing things that you're building? And so in our session today, we're going to take that deeper dive into this framework and look at everything that goes into the making of a magic trick. So Simon, if we flip ahead here, when we talk about describing the value, it's really about communicating the value of what it is that you want to do. And you're trying to achieve three things. One, you're trying to attract interest. Two, you're trying to provide clarity. And then three is you're trying to build trust. By doing these three things, you can enhance the outcome, the alignment, the support, the buy-in, especially when you're pitching your ideas or proposing your ideas all the way through when it's being delivered. And it's really thinking about how can you drive engagement and satisfaction in it. So some key things to think about when you think about interest is with attracting interest, are the users or your stakeholders interested in the problem that you want to solve? Because if they aren't yet, how can you start to bring them on this journey with you and educate and start to generate some of that excitement? When it comes to providing clarity, it's thinking about the users and the stakeholders. Do they understand what they're gaining with what it is that you're trying to solve? And if they don't understand, maybe that will be a prompt to start to understand by doing this, how might it impact their day-to-day, or what is the importance of how they might be relating to this. So it's really providing clarity and framing up like how you arrived at finding the problem, but then the solution that you might be proposing. And the last one and most important is building trust. As you engage these folks, are you showing people that you care about the problem and more importantly about them? So do people feel heard? Do they feel like you have their best interest in mind? If not, they might feel hesitant, and this might all lead back to you still trying to get more support and sponsorship for what it is that you're trying to do. So I'll hand it over to Simon. He's going to talk us through different dimensions of value, but then also different perceptions of value.
Yeah, cheers, Liz. So when we talk about value, often people leap to, well, what's the thing that we're building? What's the use case that we're delivering? How is it going to deliver financial value? And that can be time reduction. It might be quality improvement of a process. It could be cost reduction. It could be output improvement or waste reduction. But that's not the whole picture. So when we're talking value, we need to think about all of the potential types of value and all of the audiences who may be interested in that. So use cases value is an important one, because that's the type of stuff that pays the bills, that justifies the labor that's going to be used, it justifies the licensing cost and the investment. But equally, there's a load of people value out there. So if we think about things like the Power Platform or increasingly Copilot, where we're trying to democratize these tools, we're looking to develop people's digital capability. We're building that future workforce that's going to all act differently, work differently, solve our problems differently. And some of the value is wrapped up in that. So it's making it a fun place for people to work. It's giving them different skills. It's making it a bit more motivating and empowering by letting people solve these problems. And then that translates to an organizational level as well. So what we can do is to start stitching these people together and connecting them in a community like us. So we're all sharing our information, we're sharing our successes. But then also for the organization value, that may attract new staff to us who haven't considered us before, or it might retain people who were considering leaving, but actually they really like the way that they work and the things that they can do. And then we can think about the IT value. So this may be things like reducing the overhead on the IT support organization. It might be giving us different insights into what we should be building into our IT roadmap. Or it could be something for the people in IT, rapid prototyping, or shining the light on that shadow IT that you're trying to reduce the risk of. But ultimately, we're trying to capture the value for all of these people. So we all want to maximize the value and increase that overlap. Now, if we think about those different perceptions of value, everybody has a different view of what it is. IT may look at it one way, business leaders may look another way, the individuals involved could look a third way. And what we can do is just consider those perceptions. So as a kind of frontline worker, my perception of value might be that it makes my life easier. It just makes the boring stuff go away. But if I was a CEO, C-suite, a senior leader in the organization, well, this could be a way that I'm enabling the strategy that I've set, that I'm executing over a number of years. So when we're framing up value and thinking about it, let's think about whose eyes are we looking through. So who are our stakeholders? What does value mean to them? And how can we maximize those conversations to really make it real for the widest audience possible?
Well said, Simon. So if we take a look at our framework, earlier had shown that the first step in thinking about this is really putting forward what is the outcome. So this is where we begin to define the value and start to think about what we want to reveal to our audience. And in order to do that, we start thinking about, why is this a problem? What difference will it make if I solve the problem? And whom is this really for? And once you start answering some of those questions, you want to start building this alignment between what outcomes can we drive for the organization, but also equally important, what outcomes can we drive for the individual who has the idea, or maybe it's themselves and their team. So we'll dive a little bit deeper now into defining value and starting to formulate our magic trick here. So we came up with some simple guidelines on how you can start framing up some value. So when it comes to thinking about what it is you want to articulate, you want to start off with understanding the problem space. So that's taking a look at different data points, talking to different folks to figure out, can you find enough information that points to a problem? Do we have enough information to understand who is affected or impacted by this problem? And through kind of gathering this evidence, you're able to start to see the opportunity or potentially the challenge on what's ahead. Once you've gotten that far, now you're going to start to describe the outcomes that you want to achieve. So this is really about framing up the problem based off of the context that you've started to build. Then as you frame up this problem and start to think about who is impacted and what benefits that they'll gain, you'll start to align this to what outcomes can this align to, whether it's for yourself, your team, or for the business. Because in communicating the value and the things that you want to do, it's important to show people how you're trying to resonate with actual larger problems that you can contribute to solving. And then we get to the fourth one, which is the fun part. This is ideating. So this is where we think about what our potential trick could be. So this is the potential solution, or maybe a couple different approaches to the solution. So that way you can understand, okay, we have this problem. here's some ideas that I have on how we might solve the problem. So that way you can start to gather feedback and really work on the positioning of your message and the value that you want to bring forth. And so it's like, Liz, Simon, this is great, but what's this look like in real life? So we've come up with an example here, just to start to give it a little bit more meat on the bone, if you will. So when we talk about understanding, let's start to build some context. So imagine we're a company that's creating magic trick products and maybe props. And we really take pride in our products and particularly our customer service that we provide. We believe that that is one of our differentiators in the market. We happen to notice that our CSAT scores, that's our customer satisfaction scores, looking okay. We think it could be a little bit better, but let's dig a little bit deeper to see if we can find data that points to a potential problem. So that's us understanding the problem, which is, how can we help our customers? And through our research, we found that our customers are expecting always on service. They want to know that they can trust when they submit a ticket, that they understand where it's at in the process and how soon they'll hear back from an agent. But they also want a personalized experience. So through our research and looking at our data, we start to understand, okay, this is the expectation and here's the problem. So we get to the next step, which is describing. So this is, again, describing the outcome. So now we're thinking about, okay, what could a potential outcome be to this problem that we've identified? So we came up with this problem statement of how might we create an engaging support services for our customers so that they can enjoy the products that they have purchased and also be worry-free. And when I'm thinking about that, I also now have to consider how do I align to that. So this is kind of getting a little bit more into the problem so you can really understand where you can make an impact and a difference. So when we start to align to whether it's an individual, a team, the customer, or the business, in this case, I'm thinking about if I'm a customer, how can I reduce the time and effort for my customer to engage and create a support request? But on the other side of the coin, I also want to understand how I can reduce the time and the effort it takes a support agent to triage that ticket and resolve the request. And so together now I'm thinking about this customer service experience from two different lenses and how can we solve for that. So that takes us to the fun part that I'd mentioned, which is ideate. So we pulled together a hypothesis based off of our context, our problem framing, and also some alignment. We arrive at this hypothesis of how might we elevate and streamline the experience of creating a support request through our customer portal using, let's say, a custom copilot. And so with this information and this research, I've built kind of the foundation to what I want to start engaging in people on and really getting a sense on, are they interested in this problem? Would it make their day better? Would it actually make an impact on our business and how we engage and improve our CSAT score? So again, this is just an example, but we do want to highlight some key things when it comes to aligning and ideating. So when you think about alignment, so this is thinking about strategy alignment. So when you start to consider the potential outcomes and the potential solutions that you might be going for, you want to think about, is the problem and the solution that I'm proposing, is this going to be impacting from the top of the business coming down, meaning this is going to have a very broad impact, and I'll probably need to engage a lot of leaders to understand how we can move the needle on something. And so when I say move the needle on something, that will take a little bit of understanding on what the business strategy or the objectives are. So in our case, it is increasing customer satisfaction and also increasing employee productivity, because whatever processes that are in place today are not leading to the most ideal or optimal outcomes that we're hoping for. On the flip side, you might take a look again at the problem statement and the solution, go, okay, from a bottoms up perspective, what might this mean for me or my colleagues or my teammates if we champion this idea and actually get the opportunity to actually bring it to life? Does that help us build our career? Does that create more change within our team? Does it create more opportunity? Or does it actually challenge the status quo and we're able to be a part of creating a movement of change overall? So those are some things to consider when you're thinking about alignment. And then on the other side of the coin, when we think about ideating solutions, we also want to come with options. I always like to follow the rule of three, come with options A, B, and C, because more than likely you might end up at like option Z. But the reason you want to do that is because there are also different things you need to consider. Someone eventually will ask you, okay, the solution sounds really complex, really complicated. How are we actually going to do this? Like, do we have the right buy-in? Do we have the right resources? Do we even have the right licenses? And so this will also help prepare you when you communicate with stakeholders, any complexities that might come with your solution. And also you're able to bring examples of other ideas that you have in case you discover other requirements or other assumptions where you might actually have to pivot and you might arrive at a more ideal or optimal proposed solution. So we just wanted to put that out there, that even though when you're sketching, there are some different dimensions you'll consider as you start to work through each of those steps to start framing up your problem. So that said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Simon, to talk about, now that we've done all of this research and homework, how do we actually set up these conversations?
Yeah, excellent, Liz. So we've done all that investigation. We know a lot more about our business, about our stakeholders, about the things that they value. And now it's really about engaging those stakeholders. So how do we really turn them on? How do we excite them? How do we get them prepared for what's coming ahead? So this is all about setting up. And one way of doing that is through a poster. And you can see that Copilot and AI are really good at some things already. Words on posters, not so much. We probably might not be excited going into an enchanted evening and some kind of mind-binning il spectacular. Probably not going to hit the mark. We need to be a little bit more targeted, and we need to be conscious of what our stakeholders value. So this is really about thinking about all those people that we've spoken about, those different perceptions, and starting to map what's important to them. How do we communicate them to make sure that not only are we going to bring them through the change, but also they're going to get the value that they want out the end of it as well. So this is a bit more of the thinking and planning stage. So it's about identifying who your stakeholders are, what will they get, what will they see, and importantly, what will they feel? So if we think about that a little bit more, we're gonna have a look at those different perception of value. So we've got to consider our end users, what's in it for them, what's going to make the difference, what do they perceive as value. So let's capture that and make sure that we're messaging so that they feel listened to and they feel seen and they know that we're in this for them. And we do that across all of our different stakeholder groups. So that may be our end users, it may be our leaders of those groups, it may be our senior leaders who are setting a strategy, it might be our IT organization. We're thinking about all of those different groups, and we can use a really simple framework to start breaking that down and really capturing that information. And we've got an example of one here. So if we think about our stakeholder, as we said, that may be an end user, say, or we've touched on that. Let's say this is our senior leader. They own the strategy. Then we think about their value and motivation. So they're trying to shift the business over the next 3 to 5 years in a direction. And we need to be able to show that the change that we're making or proposing, we can demonstrate, well, how's that going to impact the KPIs that they're measuring? How's that going to impact the business as a whole and some outcomes there? So that's really that alignment piece to start. I've heard it called a red thread. So starting to connect through the organization to show that the thing that we're doing here, this is how it aligns to the North Star, but equally, this is how it maps through the organization as well. So using that concept, we can explain where the value flows. So we can engage people by what's important to them and what are they being measured on. And that really gives us a clue to how to best engage with those groups. Sometimes it may be a wider presentation. Sometimes it might be a push communication through email or through Teams. Sometimes it may be a one-to-one. Maybe it's a training session. We've got to think about the outcomes that we're trying to drive through that and really engage through the best means that's going to deliver that value. Now, if we take on to the next step, so you're remembering the magic trick, a lot of activity would have had to have gone on behind the scenes to make sure that when that trick flowed, everything happened in the way that it was supposed to, and the audience were wowed and they got the value that they want. It's no different to what we need to do as well. We need to think about, well, what do we need to do with the technology, with the processes, with the people, to make sure that it all comes together in the right way to produce the magic, to produce the value, and leave them with that really positive experience as well. So there's a few components we can think about for this. So one is thinking about that technology, process, and people part that we've just touched on. The other bit is perhaps thinking about the operating model. So what does my team look like, and what skills do they need, and how are they going to interact with either our end users when they have a problem, or when they've got an idea, or to educate them? Or how are we going to use that communication of KPIs and impact to talk about the value to the people higher up the chain as well? So we need to think about these things. We need to think about, how does that service operate? This isn't just a tool. We need to think about the bigger picture. And all of those things are really part of our change management approach. So without that, and without taking that step back, I'm really considering, what do we need to do for each of those stakeholders, and when do we need to do it? That's what we need to orchestrate. We need to bring together those elements to make sure that we're successful and the business is successful. And we've got, this is obviously a really high level view, but you'll see in the top right hand corner there, these are the kind of topics that I start to break down quite in a fairly detailed way in my blog. So if you want to delve into the depths of some of this stuff, there's a link there, and we'll share the slide deck afterwards as well. Now, if we think back to that magic trick, we saw the cards change. How did it work? What went into it? What was the setup? Well, we're going to, as I promised, we're going to reveal that secret to you. So luckily, Vin's going to take us through that and show us how the trick was done.
Come with us on a journey to a more sustainable future, and take pride in offering a quality coffee choice to your employees.
When it's the season finale, we just eat 5G.
Add these scroll animations to the website in just a few seconds. The first thing that we have to do is to open a new card.
Now, did you see the change? Did you see? Not the change there, that's not the change I'm talking about. Did you see this change here? You see, because if you didn't see this change, then chances are you didn't see this change. Every single card becomes red. Every single one. And this right here is one of the oldest psychological illusions in the world.
Now here's the thing. You have a question. Why did I show you a video? Why didn't I do it here live? If I did it here live, there'd be hundreds of different perspectives in this room. Of course you could solve it. By showing you a video, though, you had one perspective, the perspective of my cameraman. The only thing you could see was what he was showing. You could see nothing else. With one perspective, how could you solve that? Highly improbable. So what I did on the exact same day was I put another camera in the corner to film the exact same thing. So I'm going to show you all now the exact same thing from a completely different perspective. And see if you can solve it now. I think you'll find this more intriguing than the last perspective. Same thing, different perspective.
What you're about to witness is one of the oldest psychological illusions in the world. And before we go any further, I want you to make sure that every single card here is in actual fact different. That is the first thing I want you to notice. The second thing is I want you to see that the backs are all actually blue. Now, the interesting thing about the color blue is the psychological implications actually have in your mind. Now, if you're actually here, I'll get you to cut the cards, and you can pick any card you like at random. Because you're not just going with a random card here. Let's say that's your chosen card, okay? Remember that card. It's very important you actually do remember that card. Because if you don't, this next bit actually won't make sense. So, look, I understand that this card here isn't your card. Okay? I understand that that's 10 isn't. But I want you to pretend that you can visualize your card in that 10 there. So watch. If you have a look at this card here, the funny thing is, it becomes your card. Now, did you see the change? Did you see? Not the change there, that's the change I'm talking about. Did you see this change here? You see, if you didn't see this change, then chances are you didn't see this change. Every single card becomes red. Every single one. And this right here is one of the oldest psychological illusions in the world.
So what do you think of that? How many of those changes did you actually spot? I think I spotted one or two when I first saw it. I didn't realize the sheets had changed behind him. I didn't know there were all these people around there kind of coordinating the activity. And what Vin also describes as the video follows on is that you may have seen a guy go, "Way!" in the background. And that's because this stuff doesn't happen by accident. That was their 37th take. They'd taken 11 hours to film that one segment of video for like 2 or 3 minutes of video. So you shouldn't beat yourself up if you tried something and it hasn't worked. This is all about finding your path, finding the things that work for you, finding the things that work for your stakeholders. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And Joseph Teller, so you may have heard of Penn and Teller, the magicians. So he describes magic as someone spending more time on something than anyone else would reasonably expect. So more time than anyone else would reasonably expect. And I think that comes to life in Vin's video. 11 hours to film like a 2 or 3 minute segment. And it's the same with us and our careers and our knowledge. It doesn't happen overnight. We've got to practice this stuff. We've got to try it out. And time again, think about the change and think about how do we plan it to make sure that the act and the performance is a success when we get to it.
Yeah.
So I think
something that came to mind if you go back to thinking about magic tricks and spending more time than anyone would reasonably expect. It made me think of a time like when I first got into building workflows. I had taken something that I think took like 7 seconds down to 3, and it was this massive, like I made like a Visio diagram for it. I think when I printed it off, it was like a 3x4, so pretty big. But as much as I looked at my Picasso and I was so proud at how I, made this process run a little bit faster, to anyone else outside of like my head, they were just like, "That's great, Liz, it works." I'm like, but it's so magical. But that's an example of a time where you do something and it does make a difference, but people don't always see the effort that went into it. And so that's why when you do create a solution, it's really important to take the time to think about how can you actually add some magic around it to really drive home the impact, but then also be able to highlight the contributions that went into the thinking of like how you make that happen. And so that takes us to thinking about executing with flair. So this is about showmanship and, really starting to wave your wand and putting on your hats and getting people really excited and engaged. And how does that happen? So when we think about executing with flair, that's performing the trick, engaging the audience. So if we take that to the solutions that we build, the thing that we've made and we've spent so much time laboring with our teams on is either now in production or approaching production. What happens next? So we start to think about that engagement piece of it. We take that step back and think about what new behaviors are we establishing? How do we engage people in the business, create that alignment? How do we start to educate people and drive adoption? So it's really thinking about how you enable those behaviors. And then you get to the point of reinforcing the new behaviors and celebrating that. And I think the thing I'm trying to articulate to everyone here is that once you've built the thing, there's still a little bit more work ahead to really build up that flywheel, that engine of excitement to show, how meaningful and purposeful the solution that you have built is. And that's that point where you start to realize the value because people see the change in their day by using or interfacing with the solution that you've built. People also recognize the effort that went into the team, the thinking, the skills, and everyone involved to bring that to life. And that's when you can take that step back and people can really see like, yeah, all of this time, energy invested is really making a difference in our day. And when you're aligned with like org strategy, you can start to see that in KPIs. And I think those are magical moments that you can create. I know in making the session with Simon and I had thought about, the Eras tour with Taylor Swift. Everyone had these wristbands on that would glow to the music. But if you think about it, Taylor Swift and her team didn't say, "Hey, look at these cool magic bands we all put on. It's going to blink." She just let you experience that moment where you felt like you were a part of something special. And then if you wanted to learn about what was under the hood, you'd find that, hey, they built these wristbands that all communicate with each other that can be working in concert with the music to create that magical moment. And so that's an example of ways you can think about executing with flair, but a lot of it is reinvigorating that engagement, especially once something is getting ready for production.
Yeah, awesome, Liz. Thanks for taking us through that. And so just to start wrapping up, we've got a bit of a summary on what we've spoken to you about and some calls to action, really. And then just to tease you a little bit and make sure you stick around, Liz and I have been practicing a magic trick for probably not quite as long as Vin, but it's into the weeks now, and we've done a pretty good job, I think. And we're gonna try and amaze you. So stick around, and we'll show you our magic trick, and then we'll open for Q&As. But just to give you a reminder of what we've spoken about. So if we take that phrase of the magic circle, and let's change that. Let's change it, I think, in the right way, but in Dr. Silas Loki. So let's share this stuff. It's not about keeping it secret. It's about putting it out there, trying it. Tell us what works. Tell us what didn't. Tell us what challenges you've got. Let's keep this a dialogue and try and help each other. But just remember those steps. So outcome first, really thinking about the value and who that value applies to. Setting up that scenario, engaging with the right people, making sure it connects through the strategy and you're messaging it in the right way. Setting up those conditions for some success. So how do we bring together the technology, the data, the processes, the people, and then operationalize this stuff and think about how do we manage this change to make sure that it's going to be successful. And then enjoy it, execute with flair, go out there and do the road shows or meet the people or kind of do a webinar or tell people on a community call like this. Go out there and just tell people what you've done, and hopefully you'll start to hear those stories of how they've got value from it too. So three things for you to take away. Find the value and realize it. That's pivotal to everything that we're trying to do here. Find the value for the right people and make it real for them. Try our framework, give it a crack, let us know how you get on. Share it with others, and let's try and kind of get the value and get the magic flowing. And then lastly, that quote from Teller. So magic is just someone spending more time on something than anyone else would reasonably expect. Don't expect it to happen overnight. If you haven't got those skills today, just keep practicing, keep getting better time and time again. You'll be amazing magicians before you know it. And kind of in the vein of that, Liz and I are going to do a magic trick. So we're going to actually make ourselves disappear. We're not going to tell you how we did this, but hopefully you're going to be impressed and amazed. And then perhaps in the Q&As, if you ask us hard enough, perhaps we'll tell you how it was done. So are you ready, Liz?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, right, deep breaths.
Deep breath.
Stretches. Yeah. Let's just stretch that neck. Right, let's do this.
Okay. Can we get a countdown, Simon?
drop the sheet. Yeah, let's count down from 3, and we'll do the trick on 1. Okay. No, I'll say go after 1. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Ta-da!
And now we're back for Q&A.
An amazing magic trick. I think you will agree. Weeks of practice went into that. Let us remind you who we are. So Liz and Simon, look us up on LinkedIn. Have a look at the blog if you want to get into more detail. But let's open the floor. So has anybody got any questions or comments or thoughts or ideas or stories of what's worked for you? If not, then that's okay as well. So these are techniques and approaches that we've taken on lots of projects. So I think the key steps are really, as we've said, really it's about looking for and finding the value and what's important for that person, and then managing that change to ensure that it comes out the other end. Any tips for winning over a teammate to help you affect change? Let me have a go, Liz, and then I'd be interested to hear your view as well. So for me, the principles are still the same. It's thinking about that kind of what's in it for me question. It's all great to be altruistic and try and do the best thing for the company. And that's really important. As Liz said, we want to overlap those circles, that what's good for the company, what's good for us, let's try and bring those together. The way that I often try and do it is to show the value to that person. So that might mean a route to a different job or career. It might be that it's just more interesting than their day job. It's really about trying to find that value and then reinforcing it. So if you see that there's a bit of a barrier to change, you encourage them to try something. If you see them achieve that value, or that actually they even if they haven't, just reinforcing that behavior is really important. So celebrating them and holding them up and making it clear that they've gone outside of their comfort zone, or they've owned their own development, or they've done something a bit special. And yeah, it may take multiple attempts. We're all human, aren't we? There's sometimes things that we just don't want to do, and depending on the change, some are opt-in, and maybe you'll never get adoption for that person. So it's kind of tricky, I suppose, that sometimes you may just have to take a step back, because you can't force some of these changes. But certainly reinforcing the value and the behaviors, the positive behaviors, is how I tend to approach it.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I can add on to that too, Simon. First off, it sometimes can take multiple attempts, but I think that's where you have to take into consideration on, do you really understand what matters to your teammate versus what matters to you? So I think for me, when you go into these conversations, it's figuring out, one, how do you create psychological safety, that this is a safe space for us to understand each other and really build a shared pool of knowledge on, hey, this is what is top of mind for us. And then I think it's starting a conversation and saying like, hey, here's what I'm focused on. Here are the things I'd like to achieve. And this is where, based on listening to what your teammate wants to achieve, see if you can find any connections to start building bridges on, any benefits on us working together on something. Or maybe it's not so much on working on this, but maybe it's finding another problem to work on together. And so I think, one, it's really important to create the safe space so everyone can voice, what matters to them. Finding different ways to align and support each other. And then I think it's generating the excitement. Like, we make it sound easy, but it's not always easy, because you might find out that your teammate is like, hey, that is a really great problem, but I have this other problem that I really want to focus on. I think at some point in time, you have to be okay with that, because you can't, hold it against them that someone is passionate about their own problems to solve. But the thing you can remember is like, hey, maybe someday our paths will cross again. And so find ways to also leave that door open. But if it's one of those things where you're like, hey, I really would love the support of this person, I think it's getting them to actually join in on the problem solving with you. So if you're in one of those situations where you're just like, man, I would really love to work on this with Simon, he can really do wonders with this thing, then it's inviting him into the conversation and asking him how he would solve this problem. Because that's now you're collaborating and effectively building up a space for everyone to contribute. And he might come out of this saying like, hey, Liz, I actually think there's something here. Can I be a part of it, right? So those are just some things that came to mind for me when we think about getting other team members engaged, and if it takes multiple times to try.
Yeah, great call.
Yeah, I see another one in here from TK. Let's say everyone has a problem to solve. Any thoughts on something like a governance board to help assess which problem solutions best support organizational strategy and objectives? I would say yes, but I think some things to think about is to assess how big is your organization? Where do the complexities lie? Because as we know, depending on the type of problem that you're solving, you may not want to introduce too much process early on. But in the case of wanting to affect change top down, I think that's where governance boards tend to be most helpful, because you can set expectations and accountability and really tell people, how they're going to help support moving change to the point that it can get approved and actually be built. And so that's just what I've seen from my perspective is like, if you're doing something more at the team level, you may not need a governance board. But if it's, let's say, cross-department, multiple teams, lots of complexities, the governance boards can be really helpful. But I think another thing you'll want to consider is, how do you not set up process for the sake of process? It's really coming in and taking that agile iterative approach and setting like, hey, these are the core processes we're going to start with, but as we go along, we might adapt, change things as we go, because you don't want process to hold back change essentially. And so that's just some things that came off the top of my head. Simon, anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think along the same kind of lines that I was thinking, trying to find the right level of the organization to solve the problem is sometimes a way to unlock some of that. So if it is an organizational wide piece of work, you probably need to solve it, or at least get the sponsorship and drive at that top layer and through the governance boards. But is there a way to break it down so that the problems could be solved at a lower level and really empower people and to solve those problems themselves? Because then you get kind of a win-win. You get the problem solved, which helps the organization, but that empowerment and challenge of solving some problems that may be outside of your normal remit, it gives you that growth and personal development as well. So it's not always possible. It's one of those rubbish it depends answers, I guess, that it depends on the size and the complexity and the risk of those problems, but wherever possible, trying to solve it at the lowest level of the organization is something that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, and something I want to add, my product manager hat is coming on when it comes to assessing which problems and solutions should be focused on. Having different prioritization frameworks are really helpful. One of the favorite ones I like to use is called RICE. I'll put this in the chat. So when you start to, let's say, get ideas, suggestions, solutions in that needs to be vetted by the board, it's coming up with different frameworks that help the group collectively be able to make a decision objectively on which ones should be prioritized and sequenced. And it's also being flexible and setting up the cadence on, we will go through this prioritization exercise, let's say, every quarter or every month, or it could be every week because you have such a high demand and backlog that you need to work through. So find frameworks that help the team drive decision making, because sometimes it's really hard. You look at two solutions side by side and you're like, okay, one's solving a big problem for finance, another one is solving a big problem, let's say for HR in terms of automating things. How do you actually decide where you dedicate time and energy to first? It's not saying the other one's not important, but how do you arrive at making an objective decision? So finding different frameworks are very helpful. And check out RICE and let me know if that's something that folks out there find interesting or have used in the past. I'd love to hear how it's being used as well. So, Simon, anything else you want to add? I know we're coming up on time here.
No, I don't think so. I just that I've had a really great time. I hope you have too, and I hope our audience has too, and that you're inspired to go off and create your own magic in your own organizations. And as I said before, connect with us on LinkedIn and tell us about your magic stories. We'd love to hear more. So I think just a very last thanks, everyone. Thanks very much for coming along, and thanks for taking part. It's been great fun, and thanks to all the organisers, of course, of DynamicsCon. You do a consistently amazing job every single year, and it's really lovely to be a part of it for a third time. And hopefully see you next year.